Hey, I'm Sean,
I'm Sailor.
and this is the Den StrengthCast. Maybe we're just going to keep the name. I don't know. We haven't just talked about it at all, whether we should change the name at all.
Change the name or not, yeah. And we'd have that conversation. So for viewers, they're coming into this one, and they don't... We recorded a whole nother episode that, unfortunately...
Technical
audio,
difficulties.
Yeah,
we had technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties, and so it wasn't able to be released. And so this is actually, and some stuff happened in that last recording that kind of dictates the way that we want to kind of move forward in the podcast. So I don't know if we kind of want to go over that some.
We broke up.
All
no,
right.
So, okay.
I'm going to leave that pause in.
So, I mean, we had just talked about primarily, like, we went on a little bit more about macros, and we talked about carbohydrates. We talked a little bit about fats, because we had talked about protein so much in the previous episode. And then we realized we were, like, really getting off on this educational tangent that was, like, not necessarily intentional. And we felt like we were losing some of the magic of the banter of just kind of, like, hashing it out and just chatting back and forth.
Yeah, it felt like we were trying to do like curated YouTube content, but like in a podcast. And I'm a big believer that what makes podcasts fun to listen to is that it's conversational. It almost feels like you're like a third person that is like sitting in on the conversation, but you can't participate. Might be torturous even for some people, but maybe that's why they like to listen to stuff.
And I did look into putting this on Spotify, and it looks like pretty easy.
Yeah, I had seen that, and Apple seems like we just need to get like a verified email of some kind.
So like we should do that before this one comes out.
Okay.
I can probably do that tomorrow.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, if you want to do that, then we can release this one on Sunday, because originally we were kind of up in the air about when we wanted to put this one out, whether or not it was going to be... I was going to try to do it tonight, but I've been fixing my sleep schedule this week, so I've been waking up at 5, so I can hopefully get to morning gym next week.
Ooh, morning gym.
Morning gym.
Joining the morning crew again.
Yep. At least for a while, hopefully, well, like 6 months, and then nobody will see me again.
They'll be happy to see you for the brief period that you're there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for those of you that do not know, I am with child.
How far along are you?
To clarify, my wife is with child. We're expecting in July, and so got like 5 months now of training time until I'm gonna get no sleep and probably show up once every couple weeks and try to maintain what I have.
Yeah, I mean, it's different for everybody. I mean, we have a few people at the gym that just recently their partners had kids, and one of his son is, I want to say, just over 4 months, and he's been back pretty consistently for going on a month now. So he was able to get back after about 3 months, I think. Just ballparking off the top of my head here. And then we have another one that's He had his baby. Well, his wife had his baby, right? Actually, I don't know if they're married. Yeah, I think they are married. Yeah, I think they got married last summer. Anyways, he has a baby now. It happened just before Christmas, and he was back like right at the beginning of this block. And it's like it's relatively sporadic, right? But
yeah.
like he has like a fair amount of consistency. So I mean, don't expect it one way or another. You just kind of gotta ride that wave when it comes, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, you just never know. Every baby's different.
Yeah, I think I'll probably I can't make any plans, but
yeah, that's a stupid thing to do.
Right. Yeah. The hope is that it wouldn't be too bad to do like mornings.
And like,
but
it's again, it's such a toss up. I would say like, even if, I don't know, who fucking knows what's going to happen when you have a kid, right? But like, even on days that like, if you've got the time and maybe you don't feel like coming in, just come in and just fucking move, right? You don't have to come in and slam the hardest fucking weights you've ever done every time you come in, right? Especially like in the beginning, like, and this is a lesson I learned hard, but in the beginning, when your sleep is absolute fucking garbage, just like, let yourself exist. Don't feel like you gotta be training super fucking hard, because it's not gonna matter anyways.
Mm-hmm.
If you just take the time to like keep it relatively easy and like feel good, you're gonna come back to like actual training and like training hard, in such a better place than if you had like started burning yourself out, burning the candle at both ends, doing like the hard training while you're also like getting fucked up by this new being that's in your life. Yeah, like I was able to train pretty hard for the 2 weeks after the twins were born, and that was a stupid idea because then I just was like trying to recover from those 2 weeks for like a month. So just like take it easy. It's fine. It's just a season of life, you know. It's gonna feel like it's a long time when you first have the kid, but like, you know, in a blink of an eye, it's gonna be this time next year, and you'll be like, fuck, you know, I can train fine again, and everything's normal.
Yeah, that I think that's the hope, right? But I'm well, the real hope is I'm hoping that I'm gonna get and be able to come into the gym semi-consistently. We'll see though, because I'm not a super consistent lifter even without a child, so I don't have like a ton of hope for myself.
So I mean, and I think, okay, everybody's different, right? But I think for you, like, it would be a lot easier for you to be consistent if you just get the morning routine down, because it's so much easier to skip at the end of the day after you've had a shitty day.
Oh, it is 100%. I think that's where it's at. Like if I'm not coming right from work to the gym and I'm not keeping that ball rolling, like it's just not happening. Like if I'm having a shitty day at work where I like end up leaving like 20 minutes early, and so I'm getting like home 20 minutes early, even though I know I can just go to the gym 20 minutes early too. It's not a big deal, but it's just not happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other mental hurdle that you've suddenly got to overcome, you know, whether you want to or not. And, you know, sometimes it's just not there. And if you can, like, get yourself set up for the morning, it's that much easier to set yourself up for success. Yeah. At least in your individual case, right?
Oh, for sure. And I'm struggling with so many other passions/addictions, you know, being
passions,
video games largely. I mean, it's been a great year for games so far in 2024, and it was a great end of 2023 for video games. There's a lot of stuff out there that's calling my name.
Yeah, well, you know, it's not going to be calling your name for much longer.
Yeah, I know.
I tried to hold on to that life, and I was like living a double life where I'd be like, I got to have my video game time. I got to go play my video games now, and it'd be like a chore to fucking do it and try and play through these stories that I wanted to finish, and it just like it took too much away from everything else. I mean, you're only going to have one kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
it'll be a little bit easier, yeah.
But yeah, I'm like at a point where I play like maybe an hour a week, and I'm like, that's fine. That's what I get right now.
Yeah, we're gonna see how that balance goes. Like, obviously, my priorities are shifting largely. You know, baby's coming first, and it's hard to balance all that stuff though.
Oh, so I mean, you've kind of been out on workouts, so I don't know.
Well, like, I was pretty consistent, like 2 days a week. For a couple weeks, for a few weeks, this split. So I got, well, mostly Mondays. And that deadlift day. So I got like some of the fun new stuff in with the coiled pound squats, coiled deadlift, landmine stuff. I don't know if we're shifted that this week.
We haven't, no. We're actually switching things up next week. So I think that's a really good topic for our next podcast after I'm like refreshed on exactly everything that's going on next week, because I haven't looked at it recently.
Yeah, for sure.
But to that point, Jen wrote in, one of our members, many of you probably know her, and was like saying that first podcast we released where we talked a little bit about the program and why we were doing the things that we were doing was really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that it would be worthwhile to kind of go over the landmine stuff, because that's not something, like, especially a lot of the newer people, 2 percentages, like, I haven't had that conversation very deliberately with, especially with how many new people we've had this month. It's been very hard to get a lot of that kind of chatter in with people.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been like a process of enlightenment, like stages of like epiphanies, and just kind of figuring out the movements just like from the lifter side of things, because it doesn't feel necessarily natural in some of the movements to be coiled in that way and then doing that movement. I think the deadlift is probably the most awkward, because you're trying to like that your long side is the holding side, which feels off in some ways, and it's more of a squat than a deadlift almost.
Well, yeah, mechanically it's so I've had this fucking conversation with everybody. So, why is it called a deadlift? But it's so the deadlift is just picking shit up off the floor, and you're picking it up off the floor. So it's a deadlift. It looks a lot like a squat. That's okay. The names are just semantics. At the end of the day, you just gotta know how to do it.
Yeah. I think we talked a bit last in the recording that didn't make it about the idea of that coiled and that like tight, like lats down back.
Yeah, we did mention
like tucked in, elbow down, and that like concept of kind of closing that distance, like closing that space when you're trying to do an explosive movement. Do you want to go over that again?
Yeah. So, and like just to take it a step back, for especially if anybody like is on the base program listening to this, the coiling stuff, the landmine stuff, that's all the stuff that's in the pit on Mondays where they've got the barbell stuck into like the little sleeve that's in the 2 stacked plates, and everybody looks confused. That's the landmine stuff where they're like whipping the barbells around. I mean, they're not really whipping them a whole lot yet, but that's ultimately where this is gonna go.
Yeah.
Right. So. Anybody that's on base, if you stick around, this is something that you're going to end up doing eventually, because this is what's going to kind of be in our early year block every year as far as I'm concerned right now. And the concept of this coiling comes back to like using the spine as an engine, this idea of the spinal engine, right? And like traditionally in strength and conditioning, the way we've been taught as like strength and conditioning professionals at like a university level, at like a National Strength and Conditioning Association level, is like you want to have a rigid torso. You want to work from a rigid torso. The idea is that like proximal stability creates distal like power, right? So that's where like a lot of things like pale-off presses in the base program right now, things like that are very like, this last decade of strength and conditioning, this last like 15, 20 years of strength and conditioning, this idea of like anti-rotation, anti-flexion, anti-extension, lock it all down so that you can generate power, has really been like blown up by Dr. Stu McGill and what's the other guy's name? Dr. Gray Cook. I think he's a doctor. He did the functional movement screen. But anyways, they blew up this whole idea, and like it's Michael Boyle's another one. But they've really influenced strength and conditioning so that like a lot of coaches are teaching everybody to lock their pelvis and their shoulders and like make it all one stiff unit, like, which, when you kind of don't think about it, makes sense. But if you actually look at like any elite athlete, you'll notice that that's not how they move. Like, I wish I could show you like what it would really be like to sprint with a rigid torso, but it's essentially just like your body doesn't move and your limbs just flail back and forth, right? And if you really want to sprint well, I mean, you can even just like pull up YouTube right now and watch Usain Bolt, and you'll be like, well, shit, that's not the position the world's best sprinter that we've ever had uses.
Yeah.
And like there's other weird things too, like, you look at Usain Bolt and he's got flat feet. And that's like totally against every concept we come to understand, like as an educational standpoint through strength and conditioning, right? So there's all these like little things that I've had to unlearn over like the last 5 years. But as I've thought more about them, like I picked up this concept of coiling, in that like, you should be kind of revolving around the spine as an engine versus trying to lock everything down and make it stiff. And I've seen a lot of success with it, and I think it's really like unlocking a lot of people's athletic potential, but also like it's beginning to integrate like things like the low back, the muscle, the QL that you might hear me talk about, the quadratus lumborum, and how that like ties into things like the lats, ties into the glutes, and really makes everything function really well together. And a lot of the reason we're doing that now is because this block is very much about athleticism, right? But it should like really have a lot of carryover to a lot of the things that we're building up towards. And like in the next block, we're doing sprinting. In the next block, we're doing Olympic weightlifting. And this is going to be like a really good jumping off point for some of those things as we build up the skills with the landmine stuff. But it also is like just, again, so much more applicable to athletic endeavor. And like if you think about how you swing a tennis racket, or how, you swing anything, really, a golf club, a baseball bat, right?
Yeah.
Or, if you're going for a jump at an awkward angle and not like straight on to the basket, right? Any of these things, there's going to be movement between your shoulders and your hips if you're like just moving naturally and not trying to lock down like you're doing a 1 rep max squat, right?
Well, I mean, that's just true. I mean, like swinging a baseball bat, everybody's done that.
Right. Well, I mean, most people can understand that.
Yeah, most people can understand that feeling, and that's not a rigid torso.
No.
Not even close.
No.
I mean, and most naturally athletic movements, like when you just are like playing around, is not like a rigid torso.
No, and like this idea of rigidity really decreases the ability to flow with things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you are so stiff, it makes it a lot harder to like actually continue to flow with whatever demands you're met with, right? Because you just, instead of meeting whatever objective where it's at, it's like you're having to react to whatever's happening, right? You're kind of behind the curve when you're stiff, right?
Yeah.
Think of like a flat-footed fighter, right, for example, right, where like, you don't have that same spring, right? I mean, like, fighting is a really good example of what a lot of this looks like, right, because of how rotational fighting tends to be, right?
Power generation.
But I don't know how much, like, a lot of people are interested or know much about fighting. But I personally find, like, fighting to be probably the most athletic endeavor behind, like, dance, honestly. Those are, like, probably the two most high levels of athletic expression. And you can't have a rigid torso on either of those things, right? But anyway, it's kind of like reining it in a little bit here. A lot of what we've been doing with the coiling, primarily with the Landmine stuff in the last few weeks, is really just building a foundation for what we can do with the Landmine, which is going to be moving into the Landmine clean and jerks and the Landmine snatches. And that's really going to be power generation, like, through the whole system in this coiled concept, right? So, like, kind of generating power from the floor up, but doing it in a way that, like, it's different than, like, a squat, or it's different than, like, a jerk, because those are both bilateral movements, right? And with the coiling stuff, we get this opportunity to do it from a single side, which is really important, because most athletic things you're going to do aren't from, like, a bilateral even stance, right? And a lot of times you're not going to have a ton of stability in it. But a lot of times, too, you're not, like, standing straight up and down, right? Like, with a squat, we're moving the bar up. With a jerk, we're moving the bar up. But we get this opportunity with a Landmine to do everything at this forward angle, right? Or what I'll call, like, forward intent, or, like, angle of attack, right? Where you're constantly on the balls of the feet, driving forward into the implement, right? In that, when we start to transfer that force over to doing something athletic, like doing a sprint or doing a jump, you've got this experience of what it's like to be driving forward instead of constantly always driving up. Because, like, if you look at something like a back squat, it's a lot more like jumping backwards than it is like jumping forwards.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to build all your jumping power from doing something like a back squat, there's never that translation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just having this moment now where I'm thinking about it, because having done it for a few times, I catch myself, and I'm going to start, like, addressing it now. Like, in hindsight, I see myself how much I'm still trying to, like, lock everything in place and, like, find that tightness. And it's almost like you got to come at it with, like, the other mentality of just like move how it feels natural.
Right.
Like, get coiled, yes, but, like, it should feel good. And I think everything clicks for a lot of people on that last one, that step through shoulder press.
That kind of brings it all together, right?
Yeah, and I think that's, like, a really natural movement, I guess, for, like, me. And I enjoy that movement, and I think it's pretty natural for me. And that, like, step through from that coiled leg, power generation, up through, like, making space for yourself, everything kind of clicks. And I don't necessarily think about making sure everything's tight and in line when I'm doing that.
You can't do it right.
Yeah, and I think it's also feels more natural because it's the movement that is the most practiced, like the overhead movements and things like that. Most everybody has more experience with that as opposed to the other coiled movements. So I think for me coming into it now, I'm going to try to maybe be a little bit more loosey-goosey.
Yeah. And, like, for anyone who's read the notes or anybody I've deliberately told this to, like, these first 4 weeks of the block, I wrote in that, like, on the eccentrics, when you're doing the slow tempo downward into the movements, be breathing in that whole time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't breathe and brace like we were for the last, like, 4 weeks of the last block, where everything was, like, very close to maximal intensity, right?
Yeah.
We were at, like, 80% plus for the majority of it. And this was kind of an opportunity with these slow eccentrics to break out of those patterns. Because for a lot of people that don't, like, have perfect patterns, but we're doing that a lot, and this happened to me for, like, many years, they get ingrained in these patterns that are ultimately dysfunctional, or, like, not as functional as they could be. Like, they work, but there's, like, some sort of compensation in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So coming into a block like this is our opportunity to, like, empty the cup, right?
Yeah.
Start fresh, start with this white belt mentality, and, like, let your body relearn the movement at these light weights, right? And, we're 4 weeks in now, so it's not, you can't quite do this the exact same way, because if you're thinking about this concept now, things are only getting heavier. But that idea of, like, letting your body learn the movement again, I think is important, because your body's going to change as we develop all these training qualities, right? And what maybe felt really good when you first started doing a certain movement maybe is no longer the right way to do it for your body, as, like, your tissue quality is improved, or your range of motion is improved, your mobility is increased, right? Maybe your muscle mass has changed, where, like, the center of mass is for certain movements, right? So, like, whenever we're reintroducing something, like, trying to learn it fresh, I think gives you a lot more opportunities to understand it more and get better at it than, like, just kind of slamming your head against it.
Yeah. I think that it would be really good, and it'll be nice for people to get more natural in how to move their bodies with stuff like this.
Yeah.
I think just, like, knowing your body is, like, a good thing that comes from, I don't really know where it comes from, but I think, like, I found it a lot when we were doing, weightlifting stuff in, like, college, like, really consistently, like cleans and snatches and things like that, and sprints and lava monster. And just through, like, raw repetition, and not necessarily feeling like there was, like figuring it out.
Yeah.
I think that was key there. It was just like, there was no, like, ideal. It wasn't until after we were already doing it, we had that bravado of being able to just, like, come in and, like, not know what the fuck we were doing, and then just try it. And fortunately had young 20-year-old bodies to recover, which isn't necessarily the case anymore. But it wasn't until, like, after we had been doing it, at least for me, where I would go and, like, start looking at video and be like, oh, their clean looks totally different than mine. And then I'd adjust, and I'd fix. But to some extent, I do feel like you're constantly, and I feel like I've gotten stuck talking about this in, like, every fucking podcast that we've done, is, like, chasing the dream sort of, like, idea where I'll have, like, a lift that feels, like, so natural and good in one split, and then something kind of starts feeling a little bit off about it. And then I start chasing that, like, one thing, and I'm like, oh, my hips feel, like, a little bit weird. And then I start, like, hyper emphasizing my hips and, like, focusing on my hips in the squat. And then everything else starts to feel, like, weird. And then it's like, and then next thing you know, the lift doesn't feel that good anymore. And then now I'm like, I keep doubling down, and I've gone down this, like, spiral of, like, trying to fix one thing. A bunch of other shit went wrong. Now I'm trying to fix that stuff, and that stuff went wrong. And, like, a lot of times when I've had the most success, it feels like, in hindsight, was just doing kind of, like, movements, like prep movements, like doing, like, pistol squat type work to box, or doing stretches or movements that are, like, more natural movements that then correlate to that lift naturally, without me having to do, like, to think about sinking my hips. I've just warmed my hips up, and now they will sink appropriately when I'm just doing the squat.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of good things in that snippet. And this idea of, like, chasing the dragon that is perfect form, everybody gets caught up in it, especially early on. And I think there is a lot to just, like, coming at lifting, coming at exercise with this approach of play and experimentation, right? because that's really how you're going to learn your body. You know, I can teach you shapes. I can teach you how things are more or less meant to look, but I can't feel what it's like to feel your body. I don't know what it's like to be you. I don't know, like, necessarily by looking at you what your hip socket shape is like, right? And, like, you know, everyone's got different femur lengths versus shin lengths versus torso lengths. Everyone's got different shoulders. So these are all things that, like, you're best served by trying to learn it yourself, right? And I'm here to guide you to these things, but I can only ever be a guide. I can never tell you the definitive answer because everyone's body is different, and your body is yours, and you have to show up for it just as much as I do, you know?
And sometimes it could be helpful to have somebody there to be like, it looks like you're coming onto your toes a little bit too much. I always bring stuff back to the squat because I feel like it's something that everybody can kind of relate to, is that movement. But it's like, oh, I see that you're coming onto your toes a little bit. Maybe sink back a little bit, like spread the toes, like
you know,
maybe drop the bar a little bit, you know, like can give little cues, give little ideas, guidance. But yeah, exactly like you said, it's like ultimately at the end of the day, you know, practice makes perfect, and perfect practice makes perfect. Really, I said it weird.
Yeah,
but
I know what you mean.
perfect practice makes perfect. You know, it's like you need repetitions. You know, you need
experience.
Yeah,
You need experience.
Yeah,
and the only way you get experience is by fucking doing it and fucking it up, and that's fine.
Yeah,
and like you'll hear me say it a lot in the gym. A lot of what I do is just fuck around and find out. Like, I've got a lot of knowledge about anatomy and how bodies move and how things connect, but that doesn't always translate. And, like, sometimes people, I think, expect me to be like a PT, and I'll be like, oh, well, this is clearly the problem, and these are the exercises you have to do for the next 6 months. And it's like, well, you know, PT has a fucking bad track record for a lot of reasons, and that's one of them, because that's not an approach that works, right? So, you know, this idea of experimentation is something I've really been trying to push a lot more. And, like, also this idea of really trying to keep things easy, especially in the beginning of a block, keep things easy and make it hard by adding other parameters to it, like this 3 second down tempo, right? Taking 3 seconds to stretch into the bottom of the position.
I love tempo.
And, you know, so many people are, I don't know if so many people are mad about it. I mean, it's fucking hard, right?
Yeah, it should be.
And it's, again, this idea of making the easy stuff hard so that you have the time to sit and play with it and think about it and feel it, right? Because feeling it is really where, like, the money is, right? That's what's going to make a good movement.
Bringing it back to squats again, which is that tempo movement, is like, if you can feel it, like, you need to maintain balance through that solid 3 seconds, you know, down. You maintain balance, you maintain power with intent. You're not just falling slowly. You're moving down into that squat. Then when you explode up, it's just that in reverse faster. It's going to feel so much better. I love tempo. Like, I would do tempo stuff, squats specifically, even when we weren't supposed to be doing tempo, because it helps. It legitimately, I think it helps me, at least for, like, my form and my numbers. If I'm throwing, even when we're not doing tempo work, my beginning sets, lowest weight sets, always tempo.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of good things to be said about tempo, and it's a lot of the same principles that most people will be used to from, like, doing the pause squats and the warm-ups and things on the base program, right? Because it really is that opportunity to understand things at a deeper level. And, like, you know, just to go off on, like, some more of the benefits of the tempo, a lot of it, like, you know, coming from the collegiate strength and conditioning background I have, like, we would use tempo with athletes so that they could decelerate themselves better, right, and reduce chance of injury. So, you know, you go out into real life, you know, in the middle of fucking February, and there's ice on the ground. Your ability to absorb, like, if you slip, your ability to stick your leg out and catch yourself and absorb that force and control yourself on the way down is so much significantly greater if you're practicing tempo in something like your lifts. And the same thing goes to, like, if you're on the field, right? You know, if you play a sport and you get hit, your ability to control yourself into a good position, to be resilient in positions like that, really is significantly improved by training the eccentric.
You know, that's funny too, because, like, in gymnastics and stuff, they do, like, fall practice, or even in jiu-jitsu sometimes.
Judo.
Judo, it's like just learning how to fall, like hitting the ground in a way that's not gonna, like hurt you.
Yeah, I think
you
that's
know?
and that's honestly, I don't want to cut you off, but that's something I'd really like to figure out how to bring to the gym, because that's like, if you can learn that, there's so many things that are like, there's so many benefits you get from that. There's so many quality of life things that you don't, it's not something you have to worry about when you're older, right? If you've got it practiced a bunch when you're younger and healthier, because you just hit the ground better, right?
Borrow the mats one night. You know, like the jiu-jitsu mats are down there. Maybe we can roll them out early one time.
Well, I think we have a lot more comfortability with the ground because of how much we used to jump off of tall shit and just roll out of it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, like, I mean, it's not something I really thought about until we had that get together. I think it was like a year and a half ago, 2 summers ago, when we went to that park and we played spike ball. And I was just like diving for everything.
Yeah,
I was hitting the floor. It didn't fucking matter to me. I knew I wasn't gonna get hurt. And everybody was like, "Wow, you sure are on the ground a lot." I was
crazy.
like, "Yeah, why aren't you? Like, let's have some fun. Let's get into it. And like, leap for the ball and don't be afraid of the ground." But then I realized most people don't hit the ground.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, they don't know. I mean, it's like scary. People don't think of it as being scary, and it's not.
It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. You should know how to fall and then like roll with it, or at least like slide or do something where that impact isn't breaking.
Tuck your
hip.
chin.
Yeah, do whatever you need to do.
Shoulder.
I think that's a good point. I didn't even think about is the lava monster applications.
Yeah.
To how much shit that we were doing. I think that it's funny how many of these skills that kids just naturally have.
Yeah.
That we chase when we're adults. And it's like, when did this, like, I was like pre-Lava Monster, the time before that, when I was like jumping off of shit, was like 7 in elementary school, just jumping off of like the highest part of like standing on top of the second monkey bars and like jumping off onto the ground. Just like, whatever. Like,
and for anybody who doesn't know, because this was a podcast we did as like a demo.
Yeah,
and
that's
didn't
true.
release.
We never released it.
So Lava Monster, just as a brief recap, Lava Monster is like a game of tag on a playground where the Lava Monster, the person who's meant to tag the others, can be on the wood chips or whatever the ground is made out of, but can't go onto the playground itself. And then all of the humans, the people that aren't the Lava Monster, that are trying not to get tagged, can only go on the playground. They can't touch the ground. So like the Lava Monster ends up like crawling around the outside because
they can't touch the floor of the playground.
Yeah, specifically. So like you can crawl on the bars. You can like be on. I mean, it kind of depended on the playground we were on, but essentially like the flooring of the playground was off limits for the Lava Monster, but you could climb on all the shit, right? So it ended up being this really athletic endeavor that like the Lava Monster would have to climb around and jump and try and tag the people, and then.
And once they tagged one person, there were 2 lava monsters, and then the rules shifted a bit where now the lava, like, I don't know how we explained it, like froze over, but you still couldn't be on it for too long. Or did we have a time limit?
No, we didn't have a time limit.
It was basically
we had boundaries. You couldn't like run across the fucking field.
Yeah, but you could run across the wood chips then. But your goal was still always to get to, like, safety. It wasn't to, like, run endless circles in the wood chips. You wanted to run from, you'd, like, jump off of one slide, hit and roll, get up to the, and there were catwalks at the playground we played. And so, like, we would, like, sprint and roll on, like, under and bear crawl under these,
bear crawls
under the catwalks constantly, and just, like, jump. And it was crazy. It was a ton of fun.
And a lot of this is like this idea of just play and exploration, right? And that's kind of, again, what I'm trying to get things back to with some of the intention in the beginnings of these blocks, right? And I think that's going to be kind of like a mainstay in how we approach things until we get to like the test phase, right? Because like there's going to be like this natural spectrum to things as we go through a training block. And it's something I'm trying to be more intentional about with people in the base program too. Like a lot of times they need structure, right? At that base program, they need like, this is what you need to do, and you just got to try to replicate this,
Well,
right?
in that base program, your goal is to build strength.
Right.
It's to build your initial strength, and the best way to do that is going to be just that linear progressive overload.
Yeah, and like just getting really good at the foundational movement patterns, right? That kind of like we spin everything else out of.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, it would be awesome to play Lava Monster as a group.
Maybe we can make it a social event in the summer.
We gotta find a good playground though. Nothing's better. Well, road trip to West Bend.
That West Bend one was so perfect.
So good.
It was like we didn't know what we had.
Yeah, we didn't know. We did not know. But then we played on other parks too. We're at whatever park. Maybe it was perfect. It's perfect in hindsight, but then it was just kind of like we were just happy to be playing Lava Monster.
Yeah.
Simplicity of childhood.
I don't know. I mean, we're at like what 40 minutes here.
Yep. I think we're hitting.
Is there anything else you want to touch on? I mean, so like for those of us that are on percentages, we're moving into some new stuff next week, but weights are going to be a little bit lower, I believe, going into it, and we're switching from like slow down tempos to pauses again. So we'll be working on some more isometrics, but coming at it with the same principles as what we were doing with the eccentrics here. Yeah,
and I guess it's a little bit jarring because the last episode that's out is about protein, and then we just kind of like dropped the macro thing. I think that's largely intentional.
Yeah.
If people are interested in hearing more, just let us know in some way, either email or comment or just let us know somehow, and we can circle back to it. It was just like in that recording we found that it felt like it was starting to get to be a struggle to get like a chunk of information about fats that wasn't just kind of saying the same things
like
over and over again.
A little bit.
Yeah, which we'll loop back, but it's gonna be quick because I think protein is probably one of the more important ones anyways. You can fill a block on that. Yeah,
and to that point too, another question that Jen had asked, aside from like going over some of the training stuff, is like eating for performance, which I think would be a fun one. You know, it's maybe less relevant to newer people, but there's still like good information on how to like think about building meals, especially if you're finding recovery difficult, because I think that's one thing that gets people hung up on that base program is like just not knowing how to eat well to like support your body through this endeavor, right? Because this shit's hard, and it's different than like most other things you've done in your life, and you need fuel. You need fuel to do it, right? So if you're consistently coming in tired, you know, that's definitely a place we can start looking. Especially like if you're feeling like you're getting stuck on weights that maybe you shouldn't be. But
that's
a topic for another day.
For sure. So just if you got any suggestions or anything, we'd love to kind of have this be kind of like a discussion thing where we pull up questions that people have or things that you want us to cover.
Yeah, and I know that there's like a couple others that like I think Steve had dropped one. I think Allie had dropped one that we can circle back to as well. Especially like maybe as there's some crossover between these questions, we can kind of wrap a few things in at once.
And then this episode will be on Spotify and iCast or whatever their Apple podcast thing.
I don't know.
And then YouTube.
It's gonna happen.
However you do it on these respective locations, please
slap us a little like.
Slap us a little like.
Smash that like button, guys.
Like and subscribe. You know, we're out here doing our best. Please like it.
I won't grovel, not yet.
I'm easy. All right. Bye-bye.
Until next time.